Welcome to a special 15-year anniversary episode of Stories from the NNI. I'm Lisa Friedersdorf, Director of the National Nanotechnology Coordination Office, or NNCO. This morning, it's my pleasure to welcome Marcie Black, the CEO and co-founder of Advanced Silicon Group, or ASG. ASG develops nano-textured surfaces for improved performance, enhanced functionality, and lower cost. Prior to founding ASG, Marcie was the president and co-founder of Bandgap Engineering, which used nanotexturing to help lower the cost and improve the efficiency of solar cells. Marcie, thank you so much for joining us today. To get us started, could you share a little bit about yourself and how you first got involved in nanotechnology?
Sure. Thanks for having me, by the way. This is really great to be here. So I was first doing nanotech, I'd say, when I was an undergrad at MIT, and I was looking for a research partner. And I was going around talking to different professors to look for a thesis for my PhD. And one of the professors I went to was Professor Millie Dresselhaus, and she was working on using carbon nanotubes for hydrogen storage. And it really excited me because she was really viewing nanotechnology as a way to open up the toolbox and expand the toolbox of different materials we can use. So she was looking at nanotech for many applications, for thermoelectrics, for hydrogen storage. And this was really appealing to me to be able to use nanotechnology to expand the available tools that material scientists have and to use that to help solve some of the problems in the world.
As you know, the National Nano Initiative is celebrating its 15-year anniversary. Could you share your thoughts on how nanotechnology has advanced over those 15 years?
It's a good question because there's been a lot. And I think because nanotech is something that you can't see without a SEM or a TEM, many people don't realize how much nanotech is around us. So it's already being used in a lot of places, and it's really happened fairly fast. And so some examples of where it's already being used. So let's take this cold winter New England day and imagine that we're going out on a bike ride in the summer. So it's being used in the clothes that people wear to make flexible and durable clothes. It's being used in the bikes to make them more lightweight and stronger. In tennis rackets, being used in more important areas such as medicine, and kind of more near and dear to my heart is most of the solar cells being installed right now are using nanotechnology as well. And of course, in integrated circuits, nanotech is used in many different places. In particular, when I was at Motorola, we worked at flash memory, which used the basis of tunneling, which is the quantum confinement effect that makes use of nanotech. So another way that nanotech is really making an impact today is in agriculture. And I think a lot of people, again, don't realize the impact that it's making. So for example, ViveCrop is using nanotechnology to allow the insecticide and the fertilizer to mix better, which enables farmers to use less insecticide and fertilizer and still get the same amount of crop yield.
So you mentioned the expansion of our materials toolbox and using nanomaterials to solve a variety of problems. One of those problems that you've addressed in your work is looking at solar energy. Could you describe that particular application for nanotechnology and what your work was there?
Sure. So I'd say as recent as 10 years ago, the limiter in solar electricity was cost. And so we knew how to make high efficiency cells, and we knew how to make them at low cost, but making high efficiency at low cost was difficult. What my team at my previous company, Bandgap Engineering, did was we figured out that instead of microtexturing the silicon surface, which is what everyone else was doing, we did a nanotexture instead. And that nanotexture allowed more light to be captured in the cell. And so the more light you capture, the more electricity you make from the same amount of sunlight, and therefore the lower cost the solar electricity is. So we were able to do this nanotexture at the same cost per wafer, which because the efficiency went up, it actually lowered the cost per watt. So it was orders of magnitude smaller, and it did it more effectively, and it did it at lower cost. So now most of the industry, especially multicrystalline silicon solar cell, is now using nano-textured solar cell. So I'm really proud of what the team at BandGap did to help lower the cost of solar electricity.
So that was a great example of how nanotechnology is impacting solar energy. Could you share a little bit more about what your current company is doing?
So we're using the same technology that's being used in the solar industry to improve the efficiency of solar cells, but we've modified it so instead of creating electricity out of sunlight, we're measuring the protein concentration in a solution. And so the idea on a technical side is when the proteins attach to our nano-textured solar cell, they can modify the surface properties and effectively can passivate or leave the surface less passivated. And that changes the photocurrent. So we've actually used the nano-textured solar cell to measure protein concentration. And measuring protein concentration is really important in a lot of fields in the biopharma or in the medical department, because what it's going to allow us to do is to do a very rapid test that's at low cost and very sensitive to measure multiple protein concentrations in the same solution. So imagine if you had a very low cost sensor that could give you a very quick reading of what's in a solution. There's a lot of different ways that this technology could go. One way is, for example, if you want to measure the effectiveness of cancer treatment, you can do a quick measurement. You can take some blood and measure biomarkers in the blood. And because the measurement doesn't require much blood and it can be done very rapidly, it leaves the option to measure those biomarkers as a function of time. So every time the patient comes in during the treatment period, we can measure the protein, the biomarkers in their blood and plot that as a function of time and see if the treatment that they're getting is being effective. And if it's not, then doctors can dynamically alter that treatment plan.
So you've discussed some of the work of two different companies. Could you share some lessons learned or advice that you might give to students or others that are thinking of starting up a tech company like you have done?
I have a lot of advice. I think one piece of advice would be to really focus on where the big problems are in society and where you can add value with your expertise. But equally important to maintaining a sustainable company, not only do you have to add value, but you have to be able to capture that value. You have to have a business model that allows you to monetize the value that you're bringing. And I'd say the second big piece of advice is to recognize that it's the team that makes the company. So my philosophy is you only hire the best people, even if that means that you're understaffed for some periods of time. I've found that it's worth it to wait for the right people to make sure that you have the right team.
One of the things that we hear a lot about with respect to the National Nano Initiative is the fact that it brought together people from a variety of disciplines. The multidisciplinarity that was novel in the early days of nanotechnology has really become the way that we do science. And when you were talking about your work using nanostructured materials for making biosensors, it seems like that would be an area where you would need people from different disciplines. Can you share your experience working at the intersection of disciplines and how perhaps this ecosystem that has become part of the NNI has impacted your work?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think one of the things that the NNI has really done is made a community of people focused on nanotechnology. And like you said, that we need people of very different backgrounds to come together to really make this work. So we need material scientists, physicists, chemists, theorists, and electrical engineers like myself to come together and really make it work. And that was something that was a lot less common in the early days of nanotech. And again, you're right. I'm having to form a cross-disciplinary team at my current company, Advanced Silicon Group. So, for example, we needed to figure out how to functionalize our nanowires with antibodies to be sensitive to particular proteins. And that's something that I really just don't have the background to do. So I had to bring in a biochemist to come in and really teach us how to do that. So my philosophy is you need to look at your team, figure out where you need to complement your team, and try to hire the best people to complement it. And I think that's something that NNI also has been very effective at doing, is mixing people from different disciplines to really focus on a goal and accomplish it.
One of the real highlights of the NNI has been the development of instrumentation, the tools. And this was one of the early drivers for forming the NNI, the expense of high-end fabrication and characterization equipment that is too expensive for a single research group, sometimes an institution, and certainly small companies to afford on their own. How have you been able to access the tools and the instrumentation that you've needed to fabricate and characterize your materials?
Yeah, and that has been very key to us building a startup. Advanced Silicon Group is bootstrapped, so we're not raising dilutive financing. And key to doing that is having access to good shared facilities. So in the past, I've used Harvard's CNS facility, but currently we are using University of Massachusetts Lowell's core research facility. And that's been really helpful to have access to all these different tools for our development purpose. And also, it's not just the tools. There's some really good people there that if we have questions, we can go ask them. There's also a lot of other small companies that work in the facility together, and everyone's understaffed, so we try to help each other out. So a couple times I've had questions and just asked people right beside me, and they've been able to help me out, and vice versa as well. So I think that core research facility has been really good about providing a lower cost way, less capital intensive way to do expensive semiconductor fabrication while still being able to have access to all the tools.
You've talked about your two companies and some of the work that you've done and the resources that you've used. But looking into the future, where do you see some of the great challenges that are facing the nation and the world, and that where nanotechnology might be able to play a role in solving those challenges?
Yeah, and I still think that there's a lot to do in nanotech. I feel like the last 15 years, we've had a lot of applications in nanotech, but especially at the beginning, a lot of the focus was on understanding the physics and figuring out how to make the nanotechnology. But now we're transitioning to the point where, yes, there's still a lot of science being done, but there's more and more work on using that nanotechnology to make a difference. And I think it's really important that people recognize that in order for the United States to really capitalize on the investment that we've done in the past to understand the physics, we need to keep supporting this community so that we can then monetize all the work that we've done and apply it to different areas. And so you asked what areas in particular I see, and I think we need to focus on some of the bigger challenges left in the world to solve, and which ones can be solved by more materials and better materials. And I think two of the biggest issues are energy and environment and medicine. So I'm very excited about both of those areas and the part that nanotech has to play in that. For energy and the environment, I see batteries as being an important space that nanotech can really help with. And for medicine, there's a whole bunch of areas that we can help by providing nanotech. So in medicine, people are using nanotechnology, for example, to deliver drugs more effectively. And I mentioned our biosensors, so being able to detect more sensitively what's happening in our body. So imagine if every time you went to the restroom, you got a full reading of how your body's doing. And it can tell you things like you're dehydrated, you should drink a little more, you're a little low on electrolytes, you should make sure you eat a banana. Or it gives you indications like, ooh, you better go see a doctor, something's going on with your thyroid. So that's one thing I'm really excited about that nanotech can really make an impact on is medicine. Both in the diagnostics and the delivery of medicine.
I want to thank you again for taking so much time this morning to talk with us. Do you have any closing thoughts that you would like to share with the listeners?
I think, again, we need to make sure that we continue to support this community so that we can really benefit from all the work that we've done, because there's a whole lot more to do and a whole lot of ways that nanotech can really improve the world today.
Thank you for joining us today for this special 15-year anniversary edition of Stories from the NNI. If you would like to learn more about nanotechnology, please visit nano.gov or email us at info@nnco.nano.gov and check back here for more stories.